The story of civil rights movement is a story of the women who at times discreetly, always dedicated, and too often with little recognition, stood up to tear down the barriers between fulfilling the dream and deferring it. They were Dorothy Height, Rosa Parks, Betty Shabazz, my dear friend Coretta Scott King, and the countless unknown women who helped to make all our lives more just and more equal. I have standing with me a young 12-year-old member of the next generation. Her name is Amandla, which in Zulu means power. Yes, indeed. So, I just have a word or two to say to Amandla, that we are passing on to you the torch. You will be the next generation to pick up and carry on where I and the rest of my generation leave West. God bless you, and good luck to you. Thank you.
Today, I want to honor 4 little girls of the civil rights movement. 11-year-old Denise McNair, 14-year-old Addie Mae Collins, Carol Robertson, 14, and Cynthia Wesley, 14. In 1963, they were killed at 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama, when a bomb exploded while they were in Sunday school. I'm 12 years old. Those 4 little girls were my age. Although they didn't live long enough to be recognized as women of the civil rights movement, they should be part of that wonderful legacy because, as Dr. King said at their funeral, they didn't live long lives, but they lived meaningful lives. I plan to live a meaningful life too. Thank you.
Fitting for her to recognize those 4 young women who died there in Birmingham. I want to introduce now Karen Finney, Democratic strategist, MSNBC contributor, regular Washington Watch. Also, Deborah Simmons, she's senior correspondent for the Washington Times. Also, glad to have both of you here. This section of the program right now is focusing on women in the civil rights movement. And women don't get a lot of credit, don't get a lot of attention, but they were on the front lines.
No, absolutely. I mean, even if you think back to Dorothy Height, she was really, the late Dorothy Height, she was really the only esteemed woman that stood among the original men, 6 of the civil rights movement. Absolutely.
Even though you had Ella Baker, a student nonviolent coordinating committee, Constance Baker Motley.
Dorothy Cotton, you have
Daisy Bates,
Daisy
with the
Bates.
Little Rock Nine.
Yeah.
It was also important, though, earlier in the program when you heard Bernice King talking about her mother and role that her mom played in the movement and also in making today happen and in getting us to this point. I think sometimes we focus on that point, but we don't remember always that it is the Dorothy Heights of the world,
of course,
and the Coretta Scott Kings of the world who took up that mantle and were a part of making sure we got here.
Speaking right now as somebody who wasn't out there marching, but she was raising money, bailing folks out of jail. Let's go to the stage. Diane Carroll is speaking.
I'm older than you think I am, standing here like a fool in high-heel shoes at 77 years of age. So you see, I knew Dr. King, and to talk about Dr. Martin Luther King is to talk about hope. The first time I met him in the early 60s, when I was about 12, I was really struck by what a quiet man he was. He always seemed quiet, but the first time I heard him speak, suddenly it was as if he was breathing a fire of hope all over all of us. And in all of us who needed desperately a man like Dr. King to turn our hopes and dreams into action. He aroused in us a total commitment to his dream, which drew 250,000 of us here in 1963. In those days, I must confess that I was afraid to come to Washington because it was the South and it operated like the South. I was a little girl from New York, and that always scared the hell out of me. But I can remember well when I was a girl, good reason for feeling that way. I was taking the train from New York to visit my grandmother in North Carolina, and it was here in our nation's capital that the conductor would ask me and my family to move to the colored car. And I asked my mother, why? What have I done? Nothing, she replied. And Dr. King said nothing was not enough. We had to start doing something. And thanks to him, the hope he inspired, we did. And we are. I was introduced to Dr. King in Brooklyn one evening before we were to make an appearance on a radio program. He was very young, and so was I. Because I was a young mother at the time, I felt bold enough to ask him why a man with a family, with a wife and children, was willing to live as a hunted man. Even back in the early 60s, we all felt that he would never live to see his grandchildren. I won't forget ever in my lifetime the expression on his face when he explained that he had already put his house in order, that his wife and children chose to walk with him on this journey every step of the way. My grandmother from North Carolina would be the first to remind us that even Moses didn't make it to the promised land. His God-given purpose was to show us the way. I say it was the same with Dr. King, who showed us the way. And all his children and all his grandchildren are here to continue his journey together every step of the way. I remember the day that we met because it was a little talk show in the back of a nightclub in Brooklyn. I thought, why is he here? I don't understand. This is really not a very important talk show. But he went almost every night wherever he could speak his words. And I will love him until the day I die. His memory is something that continues at this time in my life to give me the strength and the courage to move on, to not stop. I don't want to be satisfied with a little television show that I did and I was the star, but I was pleased to be there. Now I'm no longer pleased. We have to own the damn station.
Now that's how you end the speech where Diane Carroll said, I'm no longer pleased to have a TV show. We need to own the damn station.
And that kind of reflects that generational insight as to, yes, I had arrived at that time, but we need to move further.
Karen, you have your own particular connection to the March in Washington for Jobs and Freedom at that particular march where Dr. King gave I Have a Dream speech.
Well, I was just, my father worked in the Civil Rights Movement. He was a young lawyer. He'd just come out of Columbia, one of 3 African Americans actually in his law class, and was doing some work, did a little bit of the work on helping to organize the march. And we came down to the monument, my father and I, and we walked over to the grounds in front of the Lincoln Memorial, and I said, Dad, show me where you were. Where were you standing? And he was way far back by a tree, but he remembered exactly where he was. And to the point that you're making, what an incredible moment for me to stand there with my father as someone who has worked in the White House, who has had incredible opportunities to be here today on TV One talking about this. I mean, that is the progress that we've made, and that's a wonderful reflection, I think, for all of us in terms of where we've come from.